or a hairdo?
Sorry.
Okay. Well, the story was that if you looked at Medusa, you'd turn to stone. Well, the Greek hero Perseus had a way to chop off Medusa's head by judging her distance from where she was by her reflection on his shield, if you can believe it. Next slide. Medusa was one of three sisters who were called the Gorgon sisters. And upon the death of Medusa, the other two sisters went after Perseus to avenge the death of Medusa. Well, he managed to escape by, of all things, going off to Africa. I don't know that they ever caught up with him. But the Gorgonus, Euphorbias gorgonus, is a spineless, small-growing medusoid with a deep tap root that merges into a globular caudex from which grow these short, radiating tubercle branches. Next slide. Euphorbia flanaganii, another South African medusoid that's spineless, has a lot of branches that are tubercled. It's low growing, only a few inches tall, with radiating branches up to about a foot wide. I don't know about the jellyfish head. I don't see that. Somebody saw it and gave it that common name. Next slide. Here's a couple of very different medusoids from South Africa. The one on the left, the Euphorbia globosa, is a dwarf spineless plant with very strange globular segmented fingers that come off a caudiciform base. Very low growing, no more than about 3.5 inches. The one on the right, the Euphorbia tuberculata, has a primary tuberculate stem that's almost completely buried, the caudex, and will develop radiating branches, which one person wrote, flowers that are quite spectacular for Euphorbia, because it's sort of daisy looking, not like the ones that we saw in that really early slide that I showed you. Next slide is a Euphorbia tubiglans, another South African plant. It's dioecious. It's a spineless dwarf, somewhat similar to medusoid. The short main stem reduces down to a very narrow neck where it joins the rootstock, and it'll produce clusters of upright columns that can reach up to about 2 feet tall. Next slide is the Euphorbia susani. Somewhat similar to a medusoid. It's a small clumping species. Again, tubercles on the stem. They branch out from a central caudex that you're not going to see because it's buried under its columns. This is dormant in winter But one of the comments I read about it was that it can be moderately watered all year round, as long as it's in the good, proper draining soil. So we've seen we've seen about half a dozen medusoids, but that's actually just a fraction of the variety just in that particular group of plants. So the next slide. Well, you saw my view of this when I did my three of a kind. This is a dwarf species from South Africa, sometimes called the baseball plant, sometimes called the golf ball plant. I guess it depends what your favorite sport is. I've even seen it called a basketball plant, and I can't imagine why anybody would think it's anywhere near that. It's about 3 to 4 inches round, but it is very round and a gorgeous little plant, and it's a dioecious plant. The photo on the left shows the female. The one in the center shows the male. Curiously, the plant has a tendency to go out of round as it ages. So that happened with the two that I had. And I thought I was probably doing something wrong, but it turns out it's in their DNA. Next slide. This is in some ways similar to the obesa. It's roundish, but it also has very distinct ribs and nice color. This is also dioecious. I think we're looking at the male here. And those little flowers, those cyathea, grow on stems that are called peduncles. So neither this Melliformis nor the obesa that we just saw are spiny. So let's look at some spiny plants here. Next slide. This is the Euphorbia fera. It's a small, spiny, succulent shrublet that branches from the base. It has a columnar stem and very pronounced ribs, can form into a rounded cluster up to 2 feet wide. And since it grows in a rainy area, by the way, we're told that it can be moderately watered year round. But again, if you're growing it and you want to water it year round, make sure you've got a well-draining soil. Next slide is another spiny called the Euphorbia horrida. Yeah, properly named, I guess. Can be up to 3 feet wide. Clumping stems. You can see that beginning actually on both of these photos. Can be up to 3 feet wide and as much as 5 feet tall. Maybe 10 to 20 prominent and deeply grooved ribs on each stem. The next slide shows 2 more spiny plants. The Euphorbia pentagona on the left is a compact shrub with very prominent ribs that branches freely. It's relatively thin stems, can grow up to, and get this, 7 to 10 feet tall, with 5 or 6 deeply grooved ribs. I think these are 5s. The Euphorbia pulvinata, on the other hand, is a lower growing clump that will eventually form giant cushions. And you don't want to get too near it because they'll have thousands of little spiny heads. It'll grow only about half the size of the pentagona, maybe 5 feet tall, but with lots and lots of little spines. This is a young version of the plant in this photograph. So that about wraps up the second category. And now for category 3, we're going to look at what's called twin-spined euphorbias. They grow throughout Africa, and then across the Red Sea into Asia in a stretch that begins from the Arabian Peninsula all the way east through India and as far as Thailand and Southeast Asia. As you can guess by its name, usually they're very obviously spiny. Sets of paired spines that grow from stipules. And the illustration on the bottom left will give you a good view of those spines. However, on some species, the 2 spines have evolved to be fused into a single spine. And a few other species, in spite of being in this category, have evolved as spineless. So this is a large category with a lot of plants of different sizes and shapes. And we'll look first, next slide, will be the Euphorbia trigona. Originally it was thought it was from India. It's now found throughout Central Africa. It's a succulent with an upright 3-angled stem. How it's got its trigona. Can have many branches. Can be a camelot type. The trigonas that I have had have always just been single stem. But it can grow to between 6 and 12 feet tall. These drop-shaped leaves grow from between those spines. And one thing you should be aware of is that it has never been known to flower while in human habitation. In its native habitat, probably has, but not on your doorstep or your fingers, your windowsill. The next one, Euphorbia lactea, very popular species from southern Asia. It's an erect shrub that can grow 10 to 15 feet tall. Has succulent branches and spiny ridges, short, permanent spines that perhaps at one time were twin spined. There are many varieties of lactea. It's a very popular plant. But this is another one that, as one person put it, has never been known to flower in captivity. And yet it's a very, very popular plant. Here we see a version, the vivid green one, and the very pale variegated one on the right. Next slide. This is the Euphorbia antiquorum, and this is what's called the type species. When Linnaeus first described the Euphorbia genus, this was the first plant that he described out of 56. And by the way, in 1753, Linnaeus thought he was describing every known species of flowering plant. And he had 56 Euphorbias, succulent and non-succulent. As we know today, the true number is way north of 2,000. So it was originally thought to be from India, but nowadays botanists are not so sure what its origins may have been. But it's now cultivated pretty much throughout southern parts of Eastern Asia. Next plant. This is the Royaliana. And this one grows in a swath of southern parts of Asia, the foothills of the Himalayas, all the way from West Bengal, I guess, probably to Myanmar and Nepal and all those ring of countries on the south side of the Himalayas. It's a candelabrum style. The columnar stems have minimal spines, got a very stout trunk, and branches, and you can see here is how segmented they grow. Next slide. This is from the Arabian Peninsula and the Horn of Africa. It's the Euphorbia amac, a fast-growing tree that can reach as much as, look at the one on the right, 60 feet tall. And this is the one that had that nice photograph of just what those twin spines look like. At our flower show just this past March, we had an amac in our exhibit, and it was all of maybe 7 or 8 inches tall. So it was fun to explain to visitors that here's a little plant, and do you know if it were in its normal habitat, it would grow to 60 feet. It could grow to 60 feet tall. Hard to believe. The next plant, next slide, is the Euphorbia virosa. It's also from South Africa, and as you might guess here, Namibia and Angola, the more desert-like parts of Southern Africa. In spite of the size here, I'm told it can be very effectively pot grown. By the way, that's not me in the photograph. It's probably Guillermo. Poison tree, because virosa in Latin means poison. Next slide. I'm going to look at some different kinds of euphorbias here. This is Euphorbia resinifera from the Atlas Mountains of Morocco, and in all likelihood, this was the plant that was originally named Euphorbia or Euphorbion. King Juba wrote it. It forms a mound about 6 feet wide and 2 feet tall. And as it grows in the Atlas Mountains, which can reach, I don't know, 12, 13,000 feet, it can withstand considerable frost. Next slide. So Morocco is in the far northwest corner of Africa. Over to the far east on the Horn of Africa is Somalia. And here also is a mound-forming species, the Euphorbia mitriformis. Low-growing and slow-growing, it'll reach only about 1/4 the size of the resinifera that we just saw. But it can form a dense, compact cluster. Next slide. A very different type of plant. This is a thin branch twin spine euphorbia from South Africa. It's a dwarf shrub, develops these thin upright stems and branch base, and can grow up to a foot. The colors on just on the branches alone make it a decorative plant, and then when it's in flower, it's even prettier. Now the specimen on the right is mine, and you can see just how compact it can grow, but I'm still waiting for mine to flower. Never has. And I've had it for a good half dozen years, I think. The next slide shows the Euphorbia heterochroma from the Kenya and Tanzania. Again, a good view of those twin spines. This can grow to 6 feet or more in height. In this photo, the branches are erect, but sometimes, some specimens, the branches are decumbent, meaning they sort of flop over. When they do, those decumbent branches can actually add roots wherever the branch comes in touch with the ground and remains in contact with it. So it can grow to more than 6 feet tall if it's erect, and probably 6 feet wide if it forms decumbent branches. Slide shows the Euphorbia vulcanorum, also from Kenya. It's a densely branched shrub. The branches can have 4 or 5 angles, with spines along the margins. If you really look closely, you can see twin spines. This species can reach a maximum height of only about 3 feet. So you might have to grow it on a pot on your floor or on a tabletop. Not too good on a windowsill. The next slide shows a couple of, again, spiny euphorbias. The one on the left is the Opuntioides from Angola. It's a shrub that resembles a mini prickly pear cactus. So those branches grow as flattened columns of small pads in joint-like segments. The one on the right, the Euphorbias fruticosa, is a compact columnar shrub with erect stem that grow from the base. The stems have very pronounced ribs, and they can be anywhere from 10 to 13 in number, but it'll only grow to about 2 feet tall. The next slide shows an interesting plant from South Africa that's referred to as the twisted spur. It's a dwarf succulent with first of all, a twisted caudex, which is usually partly buried, as you can see in this photo. And it'll have numerous branches, some as long as a foot long, and they become twisted in a tight spiral. The next slide, we're going to see some geophytes here. And I think these next three are all from South Africa. So as a geophyte, to repeat, that caudex is underground, and in its growth season begins to punch through the soil line to produce these branches that radiate out from the caudex and actually lie prostrate on the ground. The next slide is the Euphorbia squarosa, with in this case, a really fabulous looking woolen rootstock. And it too erupts with many three-angled branches above the soil line. They can be either creeping or semi-erect and are slightly twisted. And the third one is a geophyte called the Euphorbia microcantha. Again, the stems radiate, but can go out as much as 2 feet in length. And incidentally, both the microcantha and the one we just saw, the squarosa, are sometimes identified as subspecies of the stellata. So there is a resemblance among the three, but they all can be significantly different in appearance. Part of what makes the Euphorbias so interesting. The next one is a very tiny geophyte. This one is less than an inch across. It's from Central and Southern Africa. Branches, when they appear, can be as much as 8 inches long. So as with all geophytes, it's not visible when it's underground. When it goes dormant, it's going to lose whatever stems or leaves that it had shown above the soil. And the caudex is not going to be visible, of course. But as I said, for those of us who like to show our plants, we're not going to keep that caudex buried. We'll show at least part of it. Next slide shows a different kind of euphorbia altogether. These are, well, the nickname is candle plant. So these have all large upright stems. In this case, the Poissonii can actually branch. And you can see that happening here at the bottom, at the base. On its main stem is a thick, erect, very stout and cylindrical trunk. It can be either single spined or spineless. This one is definitely single spine. Branches, when they grow, can be smooth and thick, and the plant as a whole can reach a height of 6.5 feet. Flowers, as they do in most euphorbias, will grow from the tippy top of the main stem or the top of the branch. And they'll be followed by deciduous leaves, and just like the geophytes, eventually the leaves drop and it'll look bare for a while. The next slide shows the Euphorbia unispina. Guess what? Its name tells what it is. It's single spine. However, some of these may also be spineless. And this can grow even taller than the Poissonii, up to 10 feet. I think most of the Poissonii grew from its native territory is Western Africa, where the bulge ends and the coastline then heads eastward toward Central Africa. So it's a different part of Africa that is native to these particular plants. So I'm going to got two more plants to show you in this category 3, and they're very unique. This is the Euphorbias herbidiformis from northeast Somalia, dwarf, spineless, globular, with a pattern that's called a tabulet. It can't grow on its own. Very, very difficult to grow. The roots rot out pretty readily, I'm told. So it's usually grafted onto something like the Euphorbia ingens or a sturdier, hardier Euphorbia. It's strange that it has 2 rest periods in summer and winter. And its flowers also grow on these short stalks, these little peduncles. And the last one I'm going to show you in this series is the Euphorbia piscidermis. This is from Ethiopia. Also, very difficult to grow on its own root. So it's almost always grafted. And you can see an example on the right where a Piscidermis, a crested Piscidermis, very odd looking creature, is mounted on top of, or grafted on top of another Euphorbia. So that takes care of the 3rd category. And now we come to category 4. Euphorbia is a kind of unique place. Euphorbia. Madagascar is a unique place. Um, when the old, well, it was long before our time. Nobody ever alive ever saw this. It was 350 million years ago. There was a giant super supercontinent called Pangea, and it began to break apart, and part of it became a somewhat smaller but still supercontinent called Gondwana, and it split off from Africa, and then it was called the India Plate, and then Madagascar split off from the India Plate, and so for the last 90 million years, it's been relatively isolated. It's estimated that the flora and fauna are more than 90% endemic. It has a large population of endemic succulents that includes an awful lot of Euphorbias, all of them magnificent, in my humble opinion. So we're going to look at them. Now, undoubtedly, the best known and most frequently cultivated Madagascan Euphorbia is the millii, the so-called crown of thorns. By now, there are probably hundreds of varieties and hybrids. They're not all red anymore. They come in other colors as well. So it's a densely branched succulent that's usually used as a hedge type plant. The next slide will show a member of the millii group. That's a thicker stem plant. And this one is unusual for the very, very unusually colorful bracts around that tiny little flower. This can grow up to 2.5 feet tall. The next slide, you'll see a mini millii with spreading branches that grow from its central caudex. So this was named for Alfred Razafindratsrid, a Malagasy botanist and nurseryman who was well known and well loved for cultivating many and popularizing many species of, well, all types of succulents in Madagascar, but especially the Euphorbias. The next slide shows a couple of columnar type tiny plants. The one on the left is the Euphorbia pachypodioides, which, as you would guess, is named for its resemblance to the pachypodium. Its spines sometimes spiral. And the one on the right, the Euphorbia viguerii, is also topped with flowers before leafing out. And both of these are quite spiny. The pachypodioides will grow only to a foot or two in height. The viguerii will probably grow as much as 2.5 feet. And the viguerii also is known for narrowing substantially at its base. You can't see it in this slide. But on the next slide, if you want to see a plant that goes skinny at its base, this is the Euphorbia lophagona. And that plant on the left is one that my wife had shown in the flower show pretty often. Lots of big leaves growing out from its spiny ridge there. The plant on the right has become very heavily branched. And I don't know how my friend Barry keeps that erect. You'll also notice got kind of vivid white flowers, and somebody gave it the name of the white crown of thorn. On the next slide, we'll see some geophytes. And these are two very closely related species, the Euphorbia labatii and the Euphorbia moratii. The labatii on the left happens to have been crossed with a Françoisii. So it's wearing some of those gorgeous Françoisii leaves. In these plants, the tuberous roots are almost always at least partly exposed. The one on the right is more than partially exposed. They produce rosettes of deciduous leaves, and as will happen with the deciduous plants, the leaves will eventually drop when the plant goes into dormancy. The next slide will show two geophytes. These are also at least partly exposed and therefore partly subterranean. The Euphorbia ramena on the left is a recently identified species. It has a thick stem that can twist slightly. And I was told it's a winter grower. It should be kept warm all year long. So in our apartment, it's always under lights. The primulifolia on the right is a geophyte that one of my friends said, you're going to have a hard time growing it. And he was absolutely right. I twice tried and twice failed. Wish it would work because it really can produce an interesting plant to look at. The next slide is going to show an upright plant. I guess something that if you really wanted to, you might want to call that a handle plant as well. This is the Euphorbia oncarensis, a slow-growing, spineless, columnar plant that can grow up to 28 inches tall. I hope mine doesn't. It's only about 7 inches now, and it's been around for a while. And again, as in so many of these species, flowers at the top. Oh, and in this case, by the way, these are called nodding flowers. They seem to be kind of downcast. The flowers will give way to leaves, and they'll stick around for a few months, and then the leaves will drop, and the plant's in dormancy, and the cycle is going to repeat again. The next slide is my namesake, which was also named for Alfred Rosenfeld. So this shows the plant leafed out after flowering. And it's also said to be capable of becoming very tall, up to 20 inches. Mine is only 8 inches tall after 15 years. Around. The next slide shows two more of these plants with nodding flowers. The Malatii, Euphorbia malatii on the left, will branch. The two previous ones did not branch. This one will, and the one on the right, which at this stage is still a very young plant, will eventually branch with age. This is called the Euphorbia maramocotrensis. Hard to pronounce. Now we come to what are my favorite plants of all the Madagascar. And I love the ones we just saw. But these, well, they just, there's something special to me. These are dwarf, low-growing plants with succulent leaves. In this case, the whatever spines they had are reduced to very small hairs. They can grow by underground shoots or rhizomes, those fat underground roots, or can crawl along the surface of the soil. The group takes its name from this particular Euphorbia ambovambensis, which has develops an interesting caudex and sturdy branches and often kind of fascinating leaves. On this one, they're curly edged. The next slide shows the Euphorbia Susanni Marnieri. It's a very rare plant. Somebody called it an awesome dwarf. Can grow up to maybe as much as 10 inches tall. Its caudex is topped with several sort of erect, semi-erect, spirally arranged leaves, erect branches, spirally leaves. And the next is the Euphorbia cylindrifolia, which gets its name from the cylindrical shape of its leaves. It's a low-growing species that in time might even form a cushion. I don't know how long that would take. Comes from a short subterranean caudex. And if I were to follow the recommendation of people who give advice on how to grow these plants, they say you should keep the caudex underground for 8 to 12 years before you begin to show any of it above the soil line. So if I have to wait that long, I'm going to be near 100 and maybe even more. That plant. I don't have that much patience. The next slide shows a cylindrifolia in the tuberiferous subspecies. And this one is much more a cushion-forming species with kind of serpentine radiating arms spreading from a central subterranean caudex that, again, you're not going to see because it's so thickly and heavily branched. Beautiful plant. The next plant is the Euphorbia decarii. And to me, in my experience, this is the one that I always thought of as the mat-forming species. Freely branching, arms that spread horizontally. You see this false decarii that I have in parentheses? It's not my phrase. It was coined by some botanists and taxonomists who are reconsidering the classification of this whole group of my favorite species. But it brings us a sense of confusion that when I read their article. So the next slide is going to show you a plants that my wife and I had for years entered in the Philadelphia Flower Show as Euphorbia francoisii, variety crassicollis, form rubrifolia, because of the red. The folks who run the flower show, the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society, suddenly in 2020 said that we have to name this Decaria. So that's the ID that you see on the card here. Euphorbia decarii. Doesn't look like what I think of as a decaria. The next slide will show what happened to a friend of ours, Bridget, who had sort of the opposite experience. She had always entered this plant as Euphorbia decarii, variety spirostica. In 2020, they said, oh no, this is really Euphorbia boitoi, variety spirostica. Well, Bridget has a little bit more patience than I. But I don't think she shows it anymore either. It's a marvelous plant. Anytime you enter a plant in the same class that she has, you're never going to win a blue. That plant's going to do it every time. So I guess what happened in this case was false becarii must have been deposed. But then it got reinstated in place of Francois. So I don't know what an old guy like me is supposed to do. The next slide shows a Euphorbia decarii subspecies Cap St. Mariensis. Beautiful plant that my wife has grown. It's got a more erect growth style than the decarii that I was most familiar with. And these taxonomists are suggesting that maybe this one should be renamed, get rid of the word decarii, retire it, and just call it the Euphorbia Cap St. Mariensis. Well, I guess that's okay. That's a good compromise. And the next slide, we're going to see the Euphorbia so-called francoisii that for years my wife had been showing winning blues. Marvelous plant. The thing about francoisii is that the leaf shapes can vary. Some are rhomboidal. I don't see that here, but I can see the key shape, and I can see the linear. The leaf colors can range from green to things with a little bit of pink, and you can see that here. And maybe even touches of silver, and I think you can see that here. And the remarkable thing is the leaf shapes and colors can vary even on the very same plant. What can you say about it? Well, One more. I want to show you. Here they're trying for another compromise, I guess. This is the one that we had called Euphorbia francoisii variety crastiqualis. It's got thicker and larger branches and remarkable leaves. So the Horticultural Society said we had to rename it Euphorbia decarii variety crassiqualis. But now they're suggesting that maybe we should just have a species called Euphorbia crassiqualis. I don't know where Francoisii goes. Well, next slide is the big finish. So Elayne and I have more or less decided that age is catching up with both of us, I guess. So we're not entering the flower show competitions anymore. But we have such fond memories of our succulent Euphorbias, and we can still see them at home, and we can be euphoric for our Euphorbias. So let me close with just a handful of our favorites. Any change of slides? There. There's another one. And another one. And another one. So that's it. That's my show. Euphoric for Euphorbia. Hi, thank you.
Thank you so much, Al. Is there, does anyone here have any questions, or does anybody have any questions for Al?
I'll have a question.
Yeah.
So I think it was Euphorbia Lake Chia. I can't remember. It was one of those. They said, oh, well, this species will not flower in captivity, basically.
Yep.
You know what I'm talking about? All right. Well, from there, how do we produce the hybrids of them if we're not able to reproduce using the flowers?
Mouse, can you repeat that for me? I'm not sure I heard that.
So Al, the question is for the Euphorbia lactea, and I think it was the trigonia.
Trigona, yeah.
Yeah, if they don't flower in captivity, how do we get the new cultivars? Are those vegetative sports? Are they genetically manipulating them?
Well, I guess you have to speak to the nurserymen who produce them. First of all, they're still in the wild, and I suppose if you can get permission to capture seeds, you can certainly do it from that. And if you already have, if you're a gardener or nurseryman with the plant in your possession, you can try to do what you can to capture seed. But I guess I'm supposing that a nurseryman is something more than a hobbyist like you or me, and so may have altogether different growing conditions in greenhouses or fields where they may be growing the plants. Sorry, I can't give you a better explanation than that, but there sure are plenty of them around.
Yeah. Anyone else have questions? Yeah.
Sorry, there were a couple of them that were listed from Mexico or South America.
Mm-hmm.
I thought Euphorbias definitionally are non-American plants.
Yeah, I didn't get that.
Yeah, so the question is some of those euphorbias were from Mexico and Southern America, but I thought the official definition of euphorbia is that they are non-American. Does that just mean non-North American?
Well, I don't know that there's an official description that would limit any reference to where its natural habitat would be. As far as I know some euphorbias are being grown in the Caribbean and in South Florida, but they're not native to any place in. Well, the only place in the USA that has native euphorbias is Hawaii, and there are a couple of plants there. But I guess they don't really count as North America. They're Pacific.
So all the spurges that we see in the gardens, most of those are imported or non-native weeds.
Yeah.
Or flowers.
Yeah, the ones that in my wife's cousin's backyard are non-succulent at any rate, and probably will be able to survive in our climate. Well, obviously.
Yeah. Any others? Okay, well, thank you so much, Al. I greatly appreciate it.
Well, I enjoyed talking to you and sharing my euphoria or euphorbias.
It was a great presentation. Thank you so much.
Okay, good night.